Thank you, Ian. It's my pleasure to be here today and to present to everyone. As Ian said, my name is Timothy Cradle. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs with the Blockchain Intelligence Group. And what I'll be presenting today is the management of cryptocurrency risk. So what you'll likely hear is a slightly negative tinged, if I can color it that way, presentation, because I'm going to go over all of the negative problems that you'll find dealing with cryptocurrency. What we'll come to at the end then is how to manage risk with cryptocurrency. But the thing you keep in your mind is risk management. You can still generalize that and say risk acceptance, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk mitigation are still the same strategies. It's no different for cryptocurrency than it is for any other type of financial sector. Oh, sorry, hit the wrong button there. Again, my name is Timothy Cradle, Director of Regulatory Affairs with the Blockchain Intelligence Group. I've been working in crypto for at least the last 6 years. I've previously been the Chief Compliance Officer for Banks Group, a UK cryptocurrency wallet. I was the Director of Financial Crimes Compliance for Celsius Network, a US and UK crypto lender. And I started my crypto career with BitPay, one of the older crypto companies in their AML compliance department. I've been in compliance and risk for over 12 years now. I've been risk analyst, I've been an investigator, I've been in cybersecurity for a brief stint, and I have a pretty lengthy and extensive background, especially in risk, but also in cryptocurrency. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. And as Ian mentioned, I'll take the questions at the end. I tend to be a bit tangential when I answer questions. So it's better if I just get through the entire presentation, then we can open the floor up for discussion. So just getting right into it. What are the risks and how do we manage them? The risks that crypto present primarily are reputation risk, financial crime risk, money laundering and terrorist financing risk, sanctions risk, and business risk. And that business risk is related to the governance of crypto businesses, regulations and compliance. As anyone who follows the crypto space knows, there are a lot of questions about regulations. In a lot of jurisdictions, you have new regulatory regimes. And in jurisdictions like the US, you have what are presented as unclear regulatory regimes when, in fact, they're just the existing regulatory regimes that are just devoid of references to cryptocurrency. There are unique products and services in crypto that, again, you have to be aware of how they function specifically to understand what their unique risks are. Then when you want to think about managing risk, which we'll come to towards the end of the presentation, again, accepting, avoiding, transferring, and mitigating are still the same strategies in cryptocurrency as they are in any other financial sector. And when you're thinking more specifically about risk management, you want to manage risk around the cash in and cash out points of crypto. You want to utilize unique technology like blockchain analysis. The fundamentals of your risk management are still going to be based on your due diligence processes. You need to have a firm understanding of the industry profiles within cryptocurrency. And again, you want to have a good sense of the regulatory expectations for your counterparties when you're dealing with cryptocurrency businesses. So I want to start with the service offerings in crypto so that we get a good sense of who your counterparties may be and who the players are in the industry. So the first thing you want to understand are wallets. So to put that in more common terms, a wallet, you'll hear the term wallet and you'll hear the term address. When you hear wallet, just think bank. If you hear address, think bank account. They're perfectly analogous. A custodial wallet is a centralized company who holds cryptocurrency on your behalf. A non-custodial wallet is either a piece of hardware or a piece of software that enables a user to essentially be their own bank and hold their cryptocurrency on their own. So think of like a flash drive or an app that you download to your phone that will enable you as an individual to hold your own cryptocurrency, or as they say in the industry, be your own bank. An exchange is typically a centralized company. There are decentralized exchanges, and they allow individuals as well as businesses to buy and sell cryptocurrency. That's the real crucial thing that you just need to understand about them, is that they specifically allow parties to buy and sell cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency ATMs allow individuals to convert physical cash into cryptocurrency. Some of them do allow individuals to do the opposite of that and convert cryptocurrency into physical cash, but for the most part, you're talking about cash to crypto. That's your only cash in, physical cash in point that you have for cryptocurrency. You can also do peer-to-peer transactions, so those are pretty rare. And as a business, you wouldn't realistically encounter those peer-to-peer transactions, so ATMs are more likely a touch point for you. Payment processors, I mentioned BitPay in my own background. They're a payment processor in the crypto industry. Crypto payment processors enable businesses to accept cryptocurrency payments. So if you're a business, you want to accept Bitcoin in the same way you accept Visa, you would use a cryptocurrency payment processor. There are ways, of course, to accept it without the payment processors, but the payment processors take away some of that Forex risk that you might have as it relates to accepting that cryptocurrency. So if you just want the dollars at the end of the day, you get a cryptocurrency payment processor, they'll accept the crypto, they'll give you dollars in exchange for it. Non-fungible tokens, these are representations of real world assets using a cryptocurrency token. So the most commonly known type of NFT are NFT artworks. If you've seen any story about NFTs in the media, you're usually looking at stories about JPEGs that are being, or picture files that are being resold on NFT marketplaces. But NFTs do have other types of utility. They can be used as proof of, I forget what the acronym stands for. It's POAP. It's proof of attendance. They can be used as tickets. They can be used just to track ownership. But you do want to understand that an NFT is a representation of a real world asset. So really just think of them as receipts. Decentralized finance. This refers to many different things within crypto, but generally these are exchanges, lending protocols, and similar types of decentralized applications. So they allow users to more often than not interact peer-to-peer, meaning that if you want to take out a loan from a DeFi app, you're not taking it out from the company that provides the app, you're taking it out from another user, or you're taking it out from a pool of funds. Typically, decentralized finance applications do not collect KYC, and they do not otherwise comply with AML requirements. So if you're in law enforcement, or if you're on the bank compliance or risk side and a DeFi app comes to you and wants banking, understand that they'll have pretty significant compliance deficiencies. And there's some increased risk there that they'll allow players that you wouldn't typically see involved in the financial system getting very directly involved. So a lot of unintended financial crime is going to flow through DeFi. Stable coins are the last one that I think it's important to note. Stable coins are cryptocurrency that attempt to maintain a one-to-one value with national currencies. So again, usually when you see crypto in the media, you see a lot of stories about extreme volatility, prices shooting up, prices shooting down. Stable coins are meant to be the opposite of that. They're the crypto version of the digital dollar, if I can call it that. There are two types of stable coins. There are more than two, but there are two that you really just need to understand. There are algorithmic stable coins, which are software that attempts to rebalance the value of crypto. So they don't necessarily have dollars in a bank account that you can redeem your crypto for. They'll just run an algorithm that will rebalance the value of that crypto. And usually they'll use other cryptocurrency to balance that out. But again, they're done algorithmically. Then there are the asset-backed stable coins, something like USDC, which actually will hold real assets to maintain their redemption value with the stable coin. So USDC holds literal dollars, US Treasury bills, and I forget the other, I think they hold bonds as their third asset. And they do that so that when the stable coin is redeemed, it can be cashed out in a one-to-one for $1. So those are the main cryptocurrency services that I want to draw focus to. There are other more nuanced services within crypto, but if you have a grasp on those 7, then you have a good idea of who you're playing with in that market. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong screen again. Cryptocurrency transactions. So what do you need to know about cryptocurrency transactions as it relates to risk? There are three primary things. Cryptocurrency transactions are pseudo-anonymous, they're instant, and they're irreversible. So when you're thinking risk, those are the three things that you need to keep in mind. When it comes to pseudo-anonymity, there are then several things you take into account. So crypto transactions on chain are just numbers on a ledger. So there is no person, there's no name, there's no attribution just on the blockchain. There's an alphanumeric wallet address and an alphanumeric hash, which contains the transaction information, but that is not tied to a real world identity. Interaction between wallets on chain are not personally identifiable without an additional layer of attribution. So either think using a blockchain analysis tool to identify the players on the blockchain, or think about those centralized players collecting KYC. And again, if you're law enforcement and you want to identify somebody, you would have to go to those centralized players, subpoena them, and collect that KYC to identify someone on the blockchain to get some level of identification. There are some data points, some significant data points that you can gain from looking at on-chain data. Again, it's just numbers and letters, but you can discover a specific wallet address. You can discover the value of the cryptocurrency in that wallet. And when I say value of the cryptocurrency, I mean very literally the cryptocurrency itself. So again, in the media, you may see for Bitcoin, for example, equated to its dollar value. If you look at it on chain, you're only going to see the amount of Bitcoin in that wallet. You can see the time and date of the transfer in UTC. You can see the value of the transaction in the cryptocurrency transferred. So if you look at what's called the transaction hash, which is really just the record of the transaction or transactions that occurred in a specific period or between specific wallets, you can see the value that was transferred. And then, of course, you can see both ends of the transaction. So you can see the sending and the receiving wallet. And that's important for, again, when you're going to try and identify these people or track some funds down, you want to know both where did it come from and where did it end up. And you can see that clearly on the blockchain. With a few exceptions, there are privacy enhancing blockchains like Monero and Zcash where that information is obscured. But for the most part, when you're talking about a cryptocurrency transaction that's on chain, you will be able to see that sending and receiving wallet, and you'll be able to see all those other data points that I mentioned. The transactions, again, are instant. So think about push payments with these instant transactions. A push payment are funds that are directly sent to the recipient rather than pulled in by the initiator. There's also no third-party intermediary to facilitate that transaction. So if I just looked at the blockchain and I said, I'm going to send this random person a Bitcoin, I could do that without anyone being able to prevent me from doing so, or without relying on any third party to facilitate that transaction. Once a transaction is sent, it sends immediately. So you may be familiar with the fact that the blockchain will need to validate the transaction. That is correct, and that does take a certain amount of time. Bitcoin, for example, can only complete 5 to 10 transactions per second. That being said, once you hit send on your transfer, it's gone. It's not going to be reversed. It's not coming back to you. There is no chargeback in cryptocurrency, and that's the third point. It's irreversible. So again, it sends out immediately. It goes through its validation. Once it's validated, then it's in the receiver's wallet. But at that point, it's completely irreversible. There's no such thing as a chargeback in cryptocurrency. The only thing you can realistically do is create a new transaction. But of course, that relies on the person on the other side agreeing to do so. If I can just speak a little bit anecdotally on that point, when I was at BitPay, the cryptocurrency payment processor, if a merchant had a request for a refund, it's totally up to that merchant to decide that they want to issue the refund. Then a brand new transaction has to be created. BitPay would otherwise have no means of reversing that transaction in the same way that a traditional payment processor would if a Visa transaction was disputed. So now I want to talk about reputation risk with crypto. So if you're thinking about partnering with a crypto service, if you're going to be banking crypto companies, or if you're just accepting crypto as payment, you want to understand who and what you will be associated with. What you see on the right of the screen is a Google Trend search just to get a sense of how popular cryptocurrency is right now based on who's searching for the volume of searches on Google over the last 10 years. At the very bottom, that little blue line is cryptocurrency, and you can see that significant downtrend to where it's plateauing. Crypto, just the abbreviated term, NFTs, and Bitcoin, you see those large spikes that are met by pretty significant valleys. The reason for that is that market sentiment for cryptocurrency is directly driven by the actual price of the cryptocurrency. So it's that sort of fear of missing out thing. It's that that sort of hype cycle where people get drawn in by the price. Then they start using it because they want to hold on to it. You know, they think the value of it will just continue to go up in perpetuity. Then once the value goes down, you can follow those trend lines in people's interest right along with the price lines. Cryptocurrency also has a sort of solution in search of a problem issue. A lot of cryptocurrency is known for having a lack of demonstrated use. What this just means is cryptocurrencies creators and promoters will say this is something we're building on for the future, and that's genuinely the case. So a lot of it is not useful for what it's promoted to be useful for. It's useful for a speculative asset. And you do have to keep in mind that the cryptocurrency industry is still in a very early stage. It's still relatively infantile. A lot of people like to point to the fact that Bitcoin was created back in 2013, but that should be differentiated from the cryptocurrency industry. A lot of these businesses are not that old. BitPay, for example, is the one I like to go back to. I always tell people when I introduce myself that it's one of the older cryptocurrency companies. BitPay is about 8 or 9 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So keep that in mind. You're not dealing with very old businesses, very tested business models, or technology that's been tested pretty significantly over time. Crypto is not overly useful as a medium of exchange. Again, these are volatile assets that people tend to hold on to profit on the rise in price. So you're not going to see a lot of people transacting with cryptocurrency. Again, I go back to BitPay. It's a payment processor. Originally, they were a Bitcoin payment processor. They've since adopted stable coins because if you want a medium of exchange, you do need something that doesn't fluctuate in price. So cryptocurrency is not great as a medium of exchange. According to some recent surveys, it's also not very widely adopted. Visa did a survey last year that concluded that globally, 18% of adults have some amount of cryptocurrency. But for the rest of the population, 55% of them are outright skeptical, 27% are just disinterested in cryptocurrency. So you have to understand that you're engaging with a very limited audience when you're dealing with cryptocurrency. And that limited audience is then counterposed against an audience who's just outright disinterested up to being completely hostile. CNBC also ran a survey at the end of 2022 that concluded that just 8% of the US has a positive view of cryptocurrency. So again, that's what you're running up against when you're looking to integrate or partner with a cryptocurrency business. You'll have a very devoted, excited following in the group that will want to use it, but everyone who's outside of that perimeter, they're going to have some negative feelings about cryptocurrency, especially given a lot of the events that happened last year with the bankruptcies and FTX. Banks are broadly shy about cryptocurrency. We've seen this not just in the headlines, but in the US, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, our main banking regulator, has issued a specific risk warning to indicate that cryptocurrency is very high risk for banks to deal with. It was a crucial player in a few of the more recent high-profile bank failures, and the OCC and the Federal Reserve Board have stated very clearly that it does not appear that cryptocurrency or crypto businesses are consistent with safe and sound banking practices. Now, they did not say blanket ban on crypto or don't touch crypto. Essentially, what they're telling banks are be aware that it is very high risk and adjust your risk management programs accordingly if you're going to onboard any of these clients. And it seems like they're also just outright saying no for banks that want to custody crypto directly. So still a pretty high hill for banks to cross if they're looking to interact with crypto companies. What's widely in the news for crypto right now are fines and regulatory interventions. We've just seen in the last week the largest cryptocurrency exchange and service period, Binance, has been sued by the US Commodities and Futures Trading Commission. That's one of two securities regulators in the US. And that lawsuit was pretty revelatory about some of the lack of money laundering controls at Binance, some of the potentially outright criminality coming out of that organization. And this is only a handful of months after the second largest cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, collapsed completely. And now its CEO is in US custody and going through his own criminal trial. So again, that's just what you want to keep in mind. That's not indicative of every player in the crypto industry, but those were the largest two, and those were the results in just the last 6 to 8 months. So going from that, I'll talk more specifically about financial crimes. And again, this is more about the proceeds that you'll receive when you're interacting with crypto. So if you're receiving crypto, if you're interacting with crypto wallets, what types of funds are you going to be exposed to? So first, what enables financial crime with cryptocurrency? It's the inherent nature of the transactions that I said at the very beginning. The transactions are pseudo-anonymous. The addresses themselves, the wallet addresses, are randomized strings of letters and numbers. The hashes are randomized strings of letters and numbers, and they are not directly attributable with an identity. The cryptocurrency transfers themselves are also not compliant with the funds transfer rule. You might also know it as the travel rule, but basically what that means is when a cryptocurrency transaction is sent, there's no transmittal data that goes with it. The only data is what I showed you on the first slide, which is value, date, time, and sending and receiving wallet. The speed of these transactions, again, it's instantaneous. It happens right away. The only delay is the time it takes for the blockchain to validate the transaction. And then finally, irreversibility. So obviously criminals like this because if you're going to steal some money, you want to make sure that people can't get it back from you. So what exactly are you exposed to sending and receiving cryptocurrency transactions? The main proceeds that you'll receive, again, and these are just criminal proceeds. I don't want to color this as if everything you receive is on this slide. This is just criminal proceeds, but you'll be exposed to ransomware, malware, and hacking proceeds, stolen funds, fraud, scams, Ponzi schemes, child abuse material, sale of illegal drugs or other illegal material. And again, it's the proceeds from all of these transactions. And then, of course, for my money transmitters and my banks, you'll receive transfers from unlicensed money transmitters. So if we look at this by the numbers, and these are prior to FTX, I don't recall off the top of my head what the size of their fraud was, but you could comfortably double what I'm about to say to include FTX. So in 2021, and these numbers are from the Chainalysis Crypto Crime Report, over $10 billion was involved in crypto-related crime in 2021. The total value of all cryptocurrency at that time was $1 trillion. So think about that. One out of every $1,000 in crypto was involved with some form of financial or internet crime. The most common types of fraud, or I'm sorry, the most common types of financial crime dealing with cryptocurrency are scams and fraud. So in crypto, the term rug pull is very frequently used, but also things like wash trading, which is self-dealing, and just outright fraud on the scale of an FTX, theft of money, things like that. And that accounted for 54% of all crypto crime by itself. DeFi, or decentralized finance, is a unique target for hackers. In 2021, over $400 million was stolen from DeFi platforms. In 2023, just in the first 3 months of this year, we've already gone over 200 million. And that was mostly from one hack. If you follow the cryptocurrency news, it was a DeFi platform called Euler Finance. They were hacked. They lost a little bit over $200 million. The most recent reporting was most of that has actually been returned by the hacker, and they're working out some sort of deal where they're going to keep a portion of those funds. But that's very common in crypto. If anyone on here is from the cybersecurity world, you'll know about these sort of bug bounties and these white hat hackers. In crypto, I hate to say it, but this is very common. It's not always necessarily common, though, that those funds are returned. So let's talk about money laundering and terrorist financing. I didn't include this in financial crimes because, as all my crime fighters know, the crimes, you have to have your predicate crime before you get to money laundering. So we want to think about this separately. So what might you have received that somebody may be attempting to launder? So typically, if you're on the receiving end of a crypto transaction, you may get transfers from what's called a mixer or a tumbler. These are purpose-built tools that are created to obscure the source and destination of cryptocurrency transactions. So they're just money laundering software, basically. The two most prominent cryptocurrency mixers are Tornado Cash, which is primarily on the Ethereum blockchain, and Wasabi Wallet, which is on the Bitcoin blockchain. If I have anybody on here from a crypto company who works in compliance, you were very familiar with hearing those terms. If you're outside of crypto, you do have to familiarize yourself with those two players specifically, but broadly, you want to get a sense of what mixers and tumblers do. Mixers and tumblers are highly correlated with the proceeds of crime. So again, when somebody is stealing funds in crypto, or when they're just using them for illicit purposes, more often than not, they're going to send them through a mixer and tumbler because they want to break up that link between the source and destination of their transfers. Again, think back to that first slide. I said one of the key data points you can get just looking at the blockchain are the source and destination wallets for a transaction. The mixer, what it does is it steps in between and it breaks that link. So even if you're not using blockchain analytics and you just want source and destination, the mixer comes in and they break that in two. So it's not totally untraceable. There are still certain correlations you can do to guess at, who's coming in and who's going out. But generally speaking, they're pretty effective in breaking the trail of transactions. In theory, a mixer and a tumbler could be used for legal purposes. And what I mean by that is, and I'll use the United States very specifically here, if a mixer were to register as a money services business with FinCEN and get money transmission licenses, and then consequently collect KYC and do the usual transaction checks or transaction monitoring and the other pillars of the BSA, then what they do in breaking that link would not otherwise be illegal. Because of what their service is, though, they do not register with those sorts of services. They don't register with FinCEN in the US. They don't register with FinTrack in Canada. They're not going to try and get registered with the FSA, or I'm sorry, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, because the service that they're providing, again, it is a money laundering service. And while they do not advertise that, it's very heavily implied. The other main use not just, I'm sorry, not main use. The other main risk you have to think of with crypto is sanctions evasion. Uh, the main use I was going to say for mixers is sanctions evasion, or I'm sorry, not main use, but one of the more prominent uses is sanctions evasion. Tornado Cash was specifically sanctioned by the US Department of Treasury and the Office of Foreign Asset Control because it was frequently used by the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, or I'm sorry, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Uh, because of that, it's easier for OFAC and Treasury to just sanction the entire wallet. So after the date of the sanction, and I'm sorry I clipped the date in the image, but this was done earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. So moving forward, if you're a US entity and you receive a transfer from Tornado Cash, you just automatically freeze it, report it to OFAC, and your user then has to apply with OFAC to get their funds back if they were using it for clean purposes. But that's the risk you run with these mixers is people are explicitly using them to obscure the link between these sanctioned jurisdictions. Individual crypto wallets have also been added to the sanctioned list. So again, the wallets themselves may not be entities, but they may just be individuals. And some of them have been linked to terrorist organizations. I think the most prominent one that's usually presented is the Alhambra Brigade, which is I was going to call them ISIS. I'm sorry, I mix up my terrorist organizations, but they're one of the Middle Eastern terrorist organizations. They were advertising openly a Bitcoin address that's now on the US OFAC sanctions list. There are wallets that are directly linked to Iranian cryptocurrency exchanges. Iran has a robust crypto industry, and there are some very decently large, not on the order of Binance, but decently large crypto exchanges coming out of Iran. One of them in particular is Walex.ir. And if you work with a crypto exchange that has feet both in the EU and the US, you might have run into Walex pretty frequently. You typically only see them sending transfers to EU and UK exchanges, but personally, having been at a few crypto companies, I can tell you, you'll get the occasional Walex transfer directly to your service. And again, like I said, freeze it, report it to OFAC, let the customer deal with the sanctions authority on that one. But it is a known risk that you will have transactions coming from heavily sanctioned jurisdictions. Some of these exchanges do use IP addresses out of their native jurisdictions, and the IP address is the easiest way to figure out who they are and what you're dealing with. But if you don't see that .ir, you don't necessarily have to assume that it's not Iran. I don't know the Australian island that has it. There's an Australian island that has a TLD that's frequently used by Iran, and I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head. I think it's .cc or something of that nature. But the important thing to remember, again, is when you discover them, you freeze them. Most of them are pretty easy to discover when they're coming directly from these exchanges. But for the most part, sanction evasion is done through mixers and these services that are intentionally set up to obscure the source and destination of funds. So you want to be very careful about cryptocurrency mixers. And again, last point to mention on mixers is because these are push payments, they're just going to happen. You're going to receive them. You're not going to be able to block them, which if you're in the US, you know that blocking and freezing are your OFAC requirements, but unfortunately, you're just not going to be able to block those funds. I've seen some novel strategies to attempt a crypto version of blocking, but generally speaking, you won't be able to block an incoming transaction. You can block an outbound one because as the wallet, you would have to authorize it, but inbound transactions, unfortunately, you're just not going to be able to block them. Then, of course, there's business risk. What you see on the right side of the screen is someone who I would assume is very well known at this point. That's Sam Bankman-Fried and his company FTX. As I mentioned earlier, Binance just last week was sued by the US CFTC, and in their lawsuit, there were a number of criminal allegations, if I can call them that. It's a civil suit, so they're not they're not being pursued by the U.S. Department of Justice as of speaking, but there are criminal offenses in that lawsuit. FTX is very notorious at this point, so I won't try to recount everything that they've been accused of doing. They stole customer funds, there was embezzlement, there was fraud, there were Ponzi-like economics in their business model. Other large crypto exchanges have been equally concerning. Kraken is one of the largest exchanges in the US. I believe they also have operations in Canada. Their former CEO was an open advocate of tax evasion and money laundering, and he did have these posts on Twitter to that effect. He directly instructed customers, ironically, not to use his exchange if they didn't want to be monitored by law enforcement or government entities. Binance, I already mentioned. FTX, I've already mentioned. If you're a US watcher, you've seen that Coinbase has been sued by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And without regard to what you think about the lawsuit itself, if you're a counterparty or if you're doing business with Coinbase, you could be implicated indirectly in facilitating a non-compliant service. So you just have to keep that in mind, that that's the risk you run when you deal with these cryptocurrency services. From an operational standpoint, again, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency highlighted these risks, and this was after a year-long study of the cryptocurrency industry. I've also witnessed it internally, having worked at a high level for several cryptocurrency services, but you often run into inadequate internal controls, inadequate internal systems, and very complex organization structures. So if I have anyone on from the banking world who does onboarding and customer due diligence, you'll note right away when you hear complex organizational structure, high risk. I don't really have to detail why that is. Obviously, the more complex the organizational structure, the easier it is to obscure beneficial ownership. And that's been a pretty significant problem in the crypto industry. Then finally is financial performance. I have some training in finance, but I won't try to expand on this too much. But exchange tokens are a big issue in crypto. Most exchanges, with few exceptions, Kraken and Coinbase being notable exceptions, issue what are called exchange tokens. They use this often to inflate the value of the exchange itself. So if you're a CPA or if you're an accountant and you're looking at the books for a crypto exchange as part of either onboarding or some form of due diligence, you need to be very aware that if they issue an exchange token, they may be inflating the value of their business because they're also including the value of the token, which may not have any genuine redeemable value. We saw this in the case of FTX. If you're more familiar with something like Celsius Network, they were doing the same thing. And it turned out after there was something called the Examiner's Report, which was released during their bankruptcy case. The main trader for the Celsius Network token was Celsius Network itself. So be very, very careful when dealing with exchanges or any service really that issues its own token. Then finally, it's difficult to determine whether or not that business is even solvent. And that's largely coming from that exchange token, but it's also just coming from the difficulty in valuing cryptocurrency generally. There are a lot of very illiquid cryptocurrencies. It doesn't take much money real world money to influence the value of a crypto, so it could easily be spiked. And then that goes on to the business's balance sheet as, we're holding, just to use Celsius as an example, $20 billion in assets, when in reality, the value of their assets could be considerably less. That then carries over into governance risk. The decision makers in the crypto industry are a very unique bunch. And I can say directly that I've seen what's slowly becoming a transition from the more technical founders to financial founders. And what I mean by that is the original founders in crypto were software developers, computer engineers, data scientists. And now you're seeing people coming in with finance backgrounds who understand that these are regulated businesses. They should have recognizable governance structures, but these older businesses in crypto you're not necessarily going to find that. With few exceptions, crypto businesses are smaller businesses and they're less well organized. They're mostly startups. As I said, BitPay is one of the older ones, and they're only 9 years old, roughly. So I think it's 7 to 9 years old. I don't know the exact founding date. Typically, they're incorporated entities and they do have board of directors, but those board of directors tend to be composed of the company's executives. So think again, case of FTX, they just straight up didn't have a board of directors, and this was a 30+ billion-dollar business. So it was a bit galling to find that out, but it was certainly the case. Celsius, which again claimed $20 billion in assets, had a 3-person board of directors. One of the 3 was the CEO. One of the 3 was the chief operations officer. And you see the effects of that very directly. So you end up with a lack of transparency, insufficient accountability for the management team, because of, again, the board of directors is made up of the management team. So how can they hold themselves accountable? Conspicuous conflicts of interest and negative effects on decision making. Those above factors lead to the inability to fulfill contractual obligations most frequently. And we saw this in the case, multiple cases in 2022 of crypto businesses suspending customer withdrawals. So again, very direct negative effects, because the board of directors can't hold management accountable, because the board of directors are usually made up of the management teams. Some crypto providers have a very unique business structure called a decentralized autonomous organization. These organizations on paper don't even have management structures. So just throw out CEO and board of director completely and think more of open source software that's being contributed to by multiple players. They replace the actual management of their organization with proposals and voting. So anyone who's holding a DAO governance token, and the governance token is just a right to vote within the organization, but it is also a cryptocurrency. So if you're holding that token, you can submit a proposal to the DAO will vote on it, and in some way they'll organize and implement it if it's approved. If it's not approved, then it just goes nowhere. That being said, especially for any listeners from the banking world, if a DAO is trying to get banking, they should be treated like a typical business. DAOs are not otherwise different or special from a business. It's just in that peculiarity in the way they organize themselves. If you want to relate that to something that's more familiar or real world, think of it as a limited liability partnership, just without liability protection. Regulation and compliance risk are pretty significant for crypto. As I mentioned at the beginning, you have a number of jurisdictions that have rolled out crypto regulatory regimes, but even in some of the more mature ones, like in the UK, where you have the Financial Conduct Authority, they have a laid out process for how to register, and they have evolving laws that are continuing to be passed. There's still some discomfort, I would say, not uncertainty, but discomfort from the crypto world in trying to comply with those regulations. If you look at the FCA statistics, only about 1/3 of the crypto companies who have even attempted to go through registration who have been approved. I was at Celsius Network. We were one of those companies. We went through registration. We were asked to withdraw. We didn't even get a chance to get rejected. We were just told to withdraw from the process. Crypto providers in certain jurisdictions, and this is mostly US specific at this point, but there are others that don't have specific crypto laws, but they may insist that they are not required to be licensed, registered, or otherwise regulated. And I am saying categorically that is false. If you are working with a crypto counterparty and they are telling you that, that is not correct. In many jurisdictions, as I mentioned, they have specified that there is a licensing regime. The UAE has VARA, which is a direct cryptocurrency regulator. Europe has MiCA, which I believe comes into effect in 2024. The UK, I've already mentioned. FCA has a registration process. In most jurisdictions, crypto providers are required to register under existing regimes. So Singapore has the Monetary Authority of Singapore. a crypto provider has to register with them. It's not a new law or not a new regulator. It's existing regulations. That's where they have to go. In the US and Canada, Canada is a little bit better than the US in that they've clearly stated that crypto companies have to register with the CAS, the Canadian, or I'm sorry, CSA, Canadian Securities Administrator, as of April, I believe. I might have the date slightly off, but they're regulating crypto exchanges as securities and crypto service providers. They've been very clear to say that. In the US, the chairpersons of our securities regulators, the SEC and the CFTC, have both said the existing securities regulations are what crypto companies, exchanges in particular, need to follow. However, they're not issuing any guidance or any documentation that has the word cryptocurrency in it that's going to tell those providers to come in and get registered. So if your counterparty is a US company and they're telling you that they are not required to register, they're not required to hold a license, again, I'm saying that is not correct. They have received communication to the effect that they should be registered and licensed in the US. If they provide services in the US, if they're a non-US company and they provide services to US customers, the same requirement applies. And we just saw this in the case of Binance, as I mentioned from last week. They're a non-US company. They have US customers. They're now being sued because they were servicing those customers without registration. So just keep that in mind. There is no jurisdiction where crypto was just able to operate without any licensing, registration, or regulatory oversight. Now we come to the casino gaming topic, and I have this highlighted as a special topic because there is a key risk that you want to understand when it comes to crypto gaming services specifically. Crypto gaming services are unfortunately frequently used as money laundering operations. This is not necessarily the intent of the operator. It's just something that people who are seeking to launder money have realized. A legitimate crypto gaming service should allow users to withdraw their winnings only. If they're allowing users to make a deposit and withdraw that same deposit, then they operate almost like the mixer that I spoke about earlier. The gaming service will pool the deposits, as does every crypto exchange that provides a centralized wallet. They pool the deposits. So if you look at it from a blockchain analytics standpoint, you have your funds coming in at one end, then you have everybody grouped together, then you have uncorrelated withdrawals coming out at the other end. And this is very frequent with gaming services. They let those deposits come in, they let withdrawals go out, and it's hard to correlate the in between. If they do not collect KYC, if they do not comply with AML regulations, then they're just identical to what's called a coin join mixer, which again is just pooling funds and breaking the correlation between deposit and withdrawal. Cryptocurrency gaming services are exclusively online services. So whatever regulations you're considering as they relate to internet gambling, those should be in place, or I'm sorry, cryptocurrency services, gaming services should be complying with those exact same regulations. As I mentioned on the previous slide, if they're telling you that because they're cryptocurrency, they don't have to comply with those regulations, that is categorically false. They should be complying with those regulations because the underlying transactions are matching the regulated activity. The cryptocurrency part, you should not try to focus too much on the cryptocurrency part in the regulatory discussion. It's the service that they're actually providing that's important. So now we can talk about risk management. So we've gone over all the risks. That's not necessarily every single one. It would be hard to figure out everything. There are risks that are emerging risks. There are risks that we just haven't found out about yet, haven't discovered yet, that we're going to have to deal with in the future. But generally speaking, everything I've gone over are the risks that you're going to be exposed to. So when you want to think about managing these risks, your main tool is going to be your due diligence if you're onboarding crypto. So I'm not necessarily referring to regulators or law enforcement here. I'm just talking about banks, gaming services, anyone who's going to have a cryptocurrency partner as your counterparty. Due diligence is going to be your strongest weapon. Every cryptocurrency company or service that you onboard must go through enhanced due diligence. You have to treat them like a high risk customer. Their business models are going to have very unique characteristics. You need to question everything that they tell you. If they say again that they don't need licenses or registrations, have them provide you with a legal opinion from outside legal counsel that has assessed their offering and come to the same conclusion. If it doesn't come from a lawyer, and if it's not independent of that business, meaning there's, get rid of that conflict of interest, then I would tell you not to believe the fact that they don't require licensing or registration. I've been in the industry long enough. I've actually done due diligence and onboarding while I was at Celsius, so I know that these stories will be brought to you. Then you want to do ongoing monitoring after you've brought these companies on board. Again, a lot of them are startups, so their governance, their management, and just their operations will change very significantly over time as you're working with them. So continue to monitor them. Don't stop your due diligence at just onboarding due diligence, but refresh that every year. Audit them if you have to. If they have an office, go on site. Make sure your due diligence is ironclad when it comes to a cryptocurrency company. Familiarize yourself with the industry. Who are the large players and who are the small players, and what's the considerable difference between the two. What you really need to understand is that bigger does not equal better in crypto. I'm sorry, somebody unmuted. I'm sorry, thought somebody had a question there for a second. Again, large players versus small players. Bigger does not mean better. FTX was the second largest exchange. Turns out they were an elaborate fraud. Binance is currently by far the largest exchange. In just the last week, we've seen, again, their lawsuit, which includes numerous allegations of criminality from that organization. Your smaller players are not necessarily lower risk. They're still very high risk businesses. Again, if you're in banking and due diligence, you'll know the risk that comes with money services businesses. So think about that if you're not familiar with crypto. Equate them to a money services business, and you'll immediately understand what level of risk you're dealing with. You want to understand the cash in, cash out points, because this is where your players on the blockchain are actually going to be identifiable, because when you're ready to convert your crypto into cash, you're going to be dealing with usually a bank, maybe a money transmitter or a payment processor who is complying with existing regulations, meaning they have KYC on crypto participants. So this is more at the transaction level, but understand what type of services allow users to exchange cash for crypto. So these are usually fintech banks, crypto ATMs, and payment processors who will allow crypto to be converted into cash or cash to be converted into crypto. Typically, most credit card issuers, at this point at least, have not allowed purchases for crypto. A lot of banks block their debit cards from being able to purchase crypto, but usually you'll have ACH transfers, wire transfers, and those types of transactions will allow cash in and cash out. Finally is blockchain analysis, and I'm going to expand on this in an additional slide in a moment, but in short, it's the ability to understand the risks of crypto transactions by adding attribution on the blockchain. And this will be my second to last slide, so I am coming to the end if anyone's time conscious. Blockchain analysis allows for the attribution of those pseudo-anonymous entities. So again, you're not going to get identification for an individual, but say you have Coinbase as an exchange on one end of a transaction and Kraken as an exchange on the other end of a transaction. A blockchain analysis tool will allow you to identify both of those players. So if you're, say, in law enforcement and you need to figure out who this person is, you send subpoenas to both of them, you send a freeze order to whoever the receiving wallet is in that transaction. If you are doing loss recovery, you get in contact with that receiving organization, you alert them, you go get a court order, and you work with them to recover those funds. If you're a compliance analyst and you're just trying to understand what level of risk comes with the, say, exchange you're trying to onboard, look at their wallet and see who are their most frequent counterparties. Who are they sending funds to? Who are they receiving funds from? Blockchain analysis allows you to do transaction tracing, but it allows you also to do transaction monitoring. So again, if you're a compliance manager or above right now and you're saying to yourself, how do I keep track of this stuff? But actually, how do I generate alerts? You'll need a blockchain analysis tool, again, to add attribution. And without any exceptions, every blockchain analysis tool will also risk rate the players. So if you go back to the financial crimes slide where I said these are the proceeds you're going to expect to receive from financial criminals, the blockchain analysis tools and these companies have already gone out, identified as many of these players as they can, and they continue to update those identifications. But even more crucially, they add risk ratings to them so you can know if, for example, you're interacting with a crypto gaming service, that may be medium risk. If it's a crypto mixer, high to very high risk. If it's sanctions, it's severe risk. Then you can take your direct actions as they relate to those transactions. Enhanced investigations are available via blockchain analysis. I'm not a very strong investigator myself, though I did come into the industry doing investigations. That was one of my first jobs. But if you're a pretty good investigator, you have the patience to go through a trace via a blockchain analysis tool, you get some really great information. Again, it's not going to tell you who the person is, but it's going to give you strong indicators about where those funds came from, where they ended up, and certain specific money laundering typologies that exist on blockchain, things like peel chains, where individuals might send very small amounts to other cryptocurrency exchanges. So you get a really good understanding of what's going on if you go through a detailed investigation. And for the law enforcement side, if you need to bring an example to court, if you need to bring this information to court, every blockchain analysis tool allows you to graph out your investigation. So you can go show a judge, a jury, or whoever the concerned party is, what these transactions look like on chain, and you can do it in a far more simplified version. So instead of saying, here's this random string of letters and numbers sending this random value to this other random string of letters and numbers, you can say, no, this is Kraken. A transfer was sent from Kraken to a non-custodial wallet. This non-custodial wallet then sent its funds to Coinbase. We identified this person at Coinbase. We also identified them at Kraken. So we know who they are, and we're proving it to you with this information. Finally, blockchain analysis is recommended by the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, who I'm going to assume everybody is familiar with, but if you're not, they're an intergovernmental body that makes recommendations on anti-money laundering frameworks at the country level. Again, they've issued specific recommendations and guidance related to cryptocurrency. And in those recommendations, they do include the recommendation that you use a blockchain analysis tool. These blockchains have massive amounts of data on them. Again, it's random strings of letters and numbers. So if you want to make any of that make sense, you're going to have to onboard a blockchain analysis tool. And what you're seeing on screen are the top 5 providers. I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, so I've tried to include all of them. But Blockchain Intelligence Group, who I work for, Chainalysis, TRM Labs, Elliptic, and CoinFirm all provide very similar products. And what I've actually had is I've been a chief compliance officer and a director of compliance, so I've had to purchase some of these from the buying side, and I've never had a stop where I haven't had to use at least 2 of them. So you also want to know the providers when you start jumping into them, but you're not going to survive in crypto risk management without a blockchain analysis tool. The main takeaways that I would say you should get from this presentation are that crypto transactions present a very unique risk. They need to be clearly understood prior to engaging with crypto providers. So before you even onboard crypto, if you're certain that you're going to do it, before you start onboarding them, get a blockchain analysis provider, understand your investigations flow, make sure you and your team are very trained and you understand all the key risks in the industry. Certain risks can be mitigated with blockchain analysis, but for the most part, your risk management strategy should be based on risk avoidance, acceptance, transfer, and mitigation, and strong due diligence. So your strategies are still your existing strategies. Your due diligence needs to be enhanced due diligence for every crypto counterparty that you're going to work with. Finally, it's important to understand the regulatory treatment for crypto. As I mentioned, there is no such thing as unregulated crypto. Every jurisdiction either has a license, a registration, or they've come out and said that their existing regulations apply because it's the transaction that's important, not the cryptocurrency itself. So if you need to have these cryptocurrencies, or I'm sorry, these crypto providers clarify that for you, have them do that, have them put it in writing, have them do it via an outside counsel who would be unbiased in their opinion. And those are the main things you want to take away when you're thinking about what risks are you going to deal with when interacting with crypto. That brings me to the end of the presentation. I thank you all for listening, and I'll go ahead and start taking questions now and try to give some good answers for those.
There are many financial crime associations and certifications in the market, but none of them are truly designed for the casino and gaming industry. That's why we present you ACGCS, the Association of Certified Gaming Compliance Specialists, a company dedicated to providing the best education and knowledge-building opportunities for those involved in casino and gaming compliance. With our knowledge and training, we have already supported and developed hundreds of compliance officers for their certification, and we will do the same for you. From money laundering and ethics to leadership and compliance programs, we provide you with every key knowledge and skill to ensure you are able to mitigate possible risks. And we do all of this through our specially designed articles, webinar series, and certification program. It doesn't matter which department you're currently in. The certification is very useful for everyone from the casino and gaming sector, and even for those who are looking to make it their career. All you need to do is get one of our packages, prepare and take the exam, and upon successful completion of the exam, you'll be provided with the certification. So, what are you waiting for? Visit www.acgcs.org and start your journey today.